Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Dave, Here We Go Gamers, and today we got this PS5 Slim game console that's actually having a HDMI port issue where it's not displaying any video output to the TV, but it does display a white light. So let's go over to the upper cam, and I'm going to teach you guys how to be able to get this issue repaired today. All right, so as you guys can see, we have the PS5 Slim model, and this is obviously the newer model, PS5 Slim. And back here, we have our HDMI port. Now, I want to let you guys know, for the people that's not too used to working on these PS5 Slims, I've worked on a bunch of these PS5 Slims so far. And these PS5 Slim actually have the same HDMI port as the PS5 Fat models. So as we all know, the PS5 Fat models, it is very, very common for the HDMI port to break on those. And instead of Sony actually building a newer and better HDMI port, they just used the same HDMI port and popped it on there. Versus like the PS3, PS4, every single revision had its own HDMI port. Sony did not do that with this one. And I believe they did that on purpose. So it could possibly break again. I don't know. So here we are. We're going to have to get this taken down to the motherboard, and we're going to get this fixed. Now, I want to let you guys know, I'm not going to play in normal speed. Sometimes people are just like, oh, why don't you play in normal speed on how to be able to take this apart? I'm going to teach you guys how to be able to repair the HDMI port on this game console, not take it apart. So if you want to watch a disassembly video, there's hundreds of videos on how to be able to disassemble this console. And once you watch how to be able to disassemble it down to on the motherboard, or you get this down to the motherboard, come back to this video, and we're going to resume right when we get down to the HDMI port. I'm going to teach you guys how to be able to get this properly repaired, easy and fast. So let's go on from there. All right, so we have the PS5 motherboard down all the way to here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to put our microscope right up top, and we're going to look to see if the HDMI port truly is broken. So let's go over to our microscope and turn on our lights and see what we could be able to see on this HDMI port. See, like, some of these pins are loose. Wow, that one's really loose. A lot of these pins are completely falling off. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and actually replace and put a whole new HDMI port on here. What I see some other repair shops do is when they get a repair in like this, where they could get away with resoldering the pins, they'll do that. But obviously, the HDMI port still isn't going to last that much longer. So really, they're just doing a temporary job because they either just don't know how to properly replace the port, and all they know how to do is just be able to do some quick soldering to it and get it done. So I'm going to show you guys the proper way to be able to get this fixed and replaced. So let's switch right back over to our upper cam. And what we're going to start off doing first is we're going to place what's known as Kapton tape around the HDMI port. What this Kapton tape does is it protects the whatever you're working on from heat. So in this case, it would be the HDMI port. So this is just regular tape. If you want to see anything that I use in these videos, link is down below in the description. So let's get this Kapton tape placed on here. This part right here, these little components that sit underneath the HDMI port, is why I see a lot of repair shops mess up on when they're heating up the HDMI port. They will heat up these tiny components. Let me let that focus. They will heat up these tiny little components up here, and they will fall off. So what I do is I take a small bit of Kapton tape, and I just place 2 small pieces of Kapton tape over it, just to make sure it's protected. So you can see I broke that piece off, and I'm going to place it right there. And then what I do is I take a big piece like this, put it really close just to make sure I can protect these 2 components down here. There's a filter down here, small little cap down there. You want that protected. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place one more piece of Kapton tape up top at a slightly different angle, just to make sure if one layer pops off, the other layer will still be intact because it's at a different angle. And that's how I do it. So that is the completion of the Kapton tape. As you can see, we're going to flip that over, and bam. Now it's time to move on to the next step. All right, so I have my heat gun. The type of heat gun I use is down below in the description. Once again, everything I use in these videos is down below in the description. I have 2 vac pumps going, and what these does is it just sucks up the solder fumes, obviously to protect my lungs. So let's go back to the microscope. So as you can see right here, we have the HDMI port. What I'm going to do is power it on. Look at this setting right here. That's how high I got it at. That's how fast I got it at. What we're going to do is place our heat gun right underneath the HDMI port, like so, using my knees. And we're going to come in with our pliers. Once it's heated up enough, we're just going to lift the HDMI port off the board. Don't use a lot of force. You use too much force, you will break some of the pins on the header. You want that HDMI port to become limp. Once it's fully limp and once you can take it out of here with ease, then you grab it. See how it's loose now? Let's go back over to the other cam. Now we could take it off just like that. As you can see over on the microscope, we have it fully taken off. So now we can power off our heat gun. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use my Hackle solder iron in order to apply new solder to this. So I'm going to use some lettuce solder, which is low melt solder, and I'm going to use some Amtech flux. This is 559 flux. Also, you can use no clean flux, which is what I have in my description below. So what I'm going to do is apply some flux like so. And we're going to go on ahead and put all new solder on the header. People always ask me is how do you do this without the connections bridging? As long as you have a good solder iron with a good solder tip, good flux, you should have no issues. As you can see, I'm able to run along the entire header with no issues. And we can see that on the other cam, so looks good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean off my solder tip, and we're going to get our new HDMI port set in there. All right, so we have my heat gun at the same exact setting. We're going to go underneath like so. Allow it to heat up. We're going to have our HDMI port on the pliers. So once the solder is melted good enough, we're just going to pop this new HDMI port in there. You can see over on the microscope, the solder is starting to flow. And this is all about patience. All about patience. Test it, bam. That's good enough. You see how easy it was just to slide that in there? You don't force it down. You don't want to break the pins inside of the HDMI port, and you don't want to put too much heat on that HDMI port where you'll melt the pins inside of the port. So let's look over at the microscope. As you can see over on the microscope, looks amazing. Looks like we have no issues. So what I do next is I just simply take my cell phone, I turn on my flashlight, I turn off the lights on my microscope, and I just do a simple eye test. I look inside, make sure there's no pins broken, nothing melted on the HDMI port, and that is sitting flush and level. You want it sitting flush and level, because if it's not sitting flush and level, you could potentially run into issues while trying to get this soldered in. So looks good. As you can see over on here, HDMI port is fully intact. Now let's go over to the microscope. So now what we're going to do over here is solder down every single individual pin. And this is where our Hakko solder iron is going to come in handy. All right, so we're going to use this solder tip. I was using the angle solder tip on the last one when I used it to put all new solder on the header. That's because the angle tip does a better job, in my personal opinion, with applying solder to the header. This straight tip is going to help us with our accuracy to solder down every single pin to the motherboard. So I'm going to put this on my Hakko tip, my Hakko solder iron, and we're going to move forward with that. Now moving on, let's go ahead and get this flux applied to the entire header. And now what we're going to do is we're going to tend our solder tip with a little bit of this leaded solder. So when we go in here and solder everything down individually, we can have no issues. So let's get that done. All right, guys, so I have a regular old toothbrush. I dipped it in 99% IPA. What I'm going to do, and I'll move back over here to the microscope, I'm just going to go around and I'm going to clean it up. Now, obviously, I did solder every single pin. We need to get a clear view. Unfortunately, the thing with these PS5 HDMI ports versus like the PS4, Xbox Series, Xbox One, like a regular HDMI port, the pins are going to be a lot longer. They're going to be a lot more easier to get a hold of. And I would typically use the angle tip to solder on. Well, these are very, very small pins, and one wrong move, you'll end up obviously burning some of the back plastic, which I did. Unfortunately, it's very, very difficult to be accurate. I try to be as accurate as possible because I like to make my work be clean, but let's go ahead. Let's get all this cleaned up, and let's see what it looks like once we get everything scrubbed off. All right, so everything is soldered into place. What I did was I took my tweezers off camera. I did check every single pin. Just kind of just like did a small push just to make sure everything is connected. Unfortunately, like I said, these pins are very small. It looks big on here on the microscope, but trust me, these pins, that is a fine tip solder iron. And so what I do with these is I really just try to get the edges really soldered down, because if you go too deep, you'll do like how I did right here, where you'll get kind of too deep and then you'll nick the plastic. So I really just go to the tips, and these last perfectly fine. Way better than what Sony will usually do. What Sony does is they don't even apply solder on top of it. It's just purely underneath the pins. On like the PS4s, if you watch like my other repair videos, like the PS4s, Xbox Series, things like that, I'm able to get solder up top and fully on top, because the pins is a lot longer. So with these, so I won't have to fully burn that black plastic up. I just really just get it on that edge, make sure it's fully soldered down. And honestly, I've never had any issues doing it just like that. So let's go ahead, let's get this partially back together, and let's get this fully tested out. We now have the Kapton tape off. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go on ahead and put the motherboard back in the console chassis, and we're going to do a quick test to make sure our work is sufficient and that it does work. So let's get this back in here and see what we could get on the screen, if anything. All right, so we have it partially back together. I turned it on. And there we go. We have the PlayStation logo. As you can see, PS5 Slim. And this one is another console in the books. So it looks like we are good. All right, that is it for today's video. As you saw, we was able to successfully repair the HDMI port on this game console. Hopefully a lot of the tips and stuff that I gave you guys in this video did help you successfully to be able to get your HDMI port repaired. If not, we do the repairs as well, so you can be able to ship in your repair to us. You can be able to reach out to us on our website, gogamers.com/repair. We can be able to get your repair organized, you get yours shipped in, and we can be able to do it for you. But yeah, like I said, that is the only strategy that I need to do that on. It's just on the PS5s. It's kind of just like getting the solder near the edge, just at least covered up enough to where that pin is not going to move and it is soldered down properly. Now, obviously, when you put the port on there, it's going to be soldered down from underneath like how it is standard with Sony. But the reason why we add that extra solder on there, we tint the solder tip and we go around and make sure there's at least solder on every single pin. And so we lower the chances of another issue like that occurred again, like how it occurred with the stock Sony HDMI port, which had absolutely no solder on top of it. Hence why the pins come loose so easy. So, but besides that, I hope you guys did enjoy this video, and I hope to catch you guys on the flip side. Besides that, see you on the next one. Peace.